Good afternoon. I'm Brett Francis from the Window and Glass Association, and I've really only got two jobs today. The first is to introduce Kenneth Hannon, who's going to give us an update. Looking forward to that. And my second job for this afternoon is that I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. And so if you've got questions as we're going through, capture them in there, and I will then share them with Kenneth and he'll answer them later on. But I can stop talking now and hand over to you, sir.
Lovely. Thank you, Brett. And thank you all for logging in this afternoon. I know everyone's busy and the sun is shining certainly here in Auckland. So thank you. And we've got a few things to cover, which I'll run through. Before I do, just some housekeeping. So if you don't mind, please, folks, just putting your microphone on mute. Happy for, obviously, camera to stay on, but yeah, certainly no background noises that will distract other participants. Okay, so this is a part two to my previous, I think it was August, I ran a webinar for the association around just announcing what some of the proposed changes to the Health and Safety at Work Act were back in the August timeframe, from April announcements through the media and so on. Since then, and it was really Brett's idea to have a follow-up later in the year to see, well, what else has been proposed since then. So this session, if you like, is a part two of what's been announced since that last webinar back in the August month. So as we go, as Brett mentioned, if you do have any questions or queries, please just drop them into the chat and we'll have some time at the end, loads of time at the end, to go over any of your questions there and just make sure you're getting the right answers in that respect. So without further ado, I shall kick off. Okay, so what we're going to focus on today, there's a few bullets there, and essentially what we're looking, and for those of you, by the way, sorry that I haven't actually met before or you don't know who I am and what I do, Kenneth Hannon, I'm a health and safety advisor working with the association now for probably the last 11 years. Supporting with health and safety systems, audits, trainings, and just general consult advice. There's also newsletters we put out, typically on a 2 monthly to quarterly basis. And yeah, very much aligning myself with the association to support members with health and safety issues. Okay, so what we're going to focus on today is just going through what the government and the regulator are looking around changing some of the Health and Safety at Work Act related areas. And it's about more reducing some of the red tape while keeping, obviously, people safe. That's what they're trying to achieve here. So what we're going to walk through here is going to be, what's changing in the legislation, what's confirmed, and kind of what you should know that they're acting on right now as well. So these are the items we're going to talk about in a bit more detail. In the last August webinar, somebody posed the question around what defines critical risk. So I made sure to put that into this one because at the time it was just a draft, and believe it or not, it's still a working definition. But there's some indicators as to what it will look like. So I will talk through exactly what critical risks means. And why I'm talking about critical risk is because that's going to be a huge part of this new legislation. If you are an organization that has critical risks in it, there's going to be more expectation around how you manage those critical risks. So I'm just going to take you through what that actually means. At the very end, then I'll talk about where you can find certain information, obviously, some guidance. I mean, obviously, I'm happy to assist and support, but outside of me, then there are obviously WorkSafe, there's MBIE, there's the Beehive. So these are again, government websites, if you like, where you can access information around what's coming and what's changing. Okay, so that will all support what I'm talking through this afternoon. Lovely. Just a quick snapshot summary, just so we're all on the same page. What we're talking about under pre-qualification today is around where the government is moving to streamline pre-qualification requirements, and where so that the requirements, if I can say, will match the risk associated with the work being performed. We're going to talk then about scaffolding and working at height, and this is a change that would undoubtedly affect, obviously, a lot of fabricators and installers, basically, where, again, this shifts more towards a risk-based rules. So a less of a one-size-fits-all, if I can say, approach to scaffolding on job sites. So there's going to be a flexibility allowed there, and that will be something that will be interesting when it comes to installers and main contractors on site. We'll talk about that more. On the machine guarding front, some of the rules are being simplified, but the duty to guard machines remains. So nothing's going to change there. You still have that duty to protect the worker. So expect clearer and more risk-focused guidance from WorkSafe around machine guarding. Now, WES, and sorry I didn't put in the explanation as to what that acronym means, it stands for Workplace Exposure Standards. Okay, it will come later on. But what's happening here, and some of you will already have experienced some of this, where again, WorkSafe inspectors are looking to see how could the workers' health potentially be affected by the environment they work in. So this is about workplace exposure, dust, fumes, vapors, all those things. So WorkSafe is reviewing many of these exposure limits, particularly around silica, solvents, wood dust, etc. And they're going to be aligning the values, if I can say, or the standards to international best practice standards. So that's a big change that's coming, and that may have implications for this industry in particular. On the overlapping duty side of things, just what we're going to see here is more clarifications to emphasize the importance of cooperation between multiple PCBUs on construction sites and otherwise. So very much here, again, and I'll define what overlapping duties are. So again, where you have a situation where you have multiple contractors or businesses, PCBUs, sharing the same workplace, there is a duty of care that each and every one of those businesses has to protect others from their work and activities. So right now, there's a little bit of, well, who's responsible for this? So these overlapping duties, there's a promise of more clarification, more transparency around expectations on shared work sites. And then we're going to just talk about reporting requirements. And this is something that I didn't mention last time, but there's going to be very much a relaxing, if I can say, of what you have to notify WorkSafe of moving forward. So essentially, they'll be looking for only serious harm, injuries, illnesses, and fatalities to be notified to WorkSafe moving forward. Currently, we have to notify them of certain incidents. So that's things like electric shocks, fires in the workplace, spills of chemicals, malfunctions of machines, where the potential was there for someone to be seriously harmed. They don't want to know that anymore, right? So moving forward, they don't want to know that anymore. It will only be those serious events. Cool. So that's a quick snapshot of what we're going to talk about in a bit more detail. Well, on the pre-qual side of things, and for those of you who may not be familiar with pre-qualifications, this is where you might have a client, for example, or a main contractor, and what they want to do is they want to qualify the service provider, be it supplier, contractor, installer, subcontractor. They want to qualify them as having robust safety systems so that they're not seen as a liability. There is some kind of recognition that they have systems and processes that align to a recognized standard. So if I was your customer and I wanted your business to be pre-qualified, I would ask you to go and either choose a Sitewise or a Totika or an Impact pre-qual or one of these players, and I would have you then pay the fee and complete this online assessment of your system. Okay, so lots of questions around your procedures and your records and things like that. And then that information gets uploaded to that site, and an independent assessor will assess you and grade your business as regards safety conformance, and then feedback to your client. They're an A grade, B grade, they're gold, or they're green rated. So this is typically what a pre-qual is. So most of you from my travels around the country are already in some form of pre-qualification. Most admittedly are in a Sitewise type pre-qualification scheme, and most will be at a green level, which is essentially an entry level, okay, normally for smaller businesses in that respect. Obviously, some of the larger players who have more robust systems and more resource to put into this will typically be at a gold status. Okay, so pre-qualifications come with some pain points, unfortunately. And the pain points that currently the government is seeing is that different clients can ask for the same evidence, but in different formats. So using a different provider. So one client might want you to use Sitewise, another client might want you to use pre-qual, and another might ask you to do Totika, right? This is you duplicating your efforts, putting the same information into different pre-qualifying templates or tools. So that is basically seen to be quite the bugbear for a lot of businesses right now who have to jump through these hoops. So some have said that they've even walked away from certain jobs because of the client, from clients' requests for them to go down this road because of the cost and time and resource to get their business qualified. It outweighs the value of the work that's on the table. So they're choosing, no, we're not doing it. Others basically, and because of this lack of consistency I was talking about across these various providers of pre-qual, means that the contractor needs to get a new pre-qualification done for every job they tender for. So that means, so one contractor saying I heard a story of one particular contractor who in 1 year completed almost, I think it was 76 pre-qualifications. Now that's not a good use of anyone's time or money. So they're promising here to change things. So the reform now is proposing that, to simplify and better align these pre-qualifications with actual risk to reduce all these duplicated efforts and evidence that's required to satisfy a third party. So that includes, even again, the government providing free-to-use templates, right, to improve national consistency around pre-qualification. So good, the fact that we won't have to jump through all these different hoops. Basically, there'll just be one hoop to jump through moving forward. And they're promising, again, free-to-use templates, which is positive in that sense. So how does that affect members, and what does that mean for you guys? Well, it could reduce the amount of repeated audits and, again, paperwork that you have to upload and supply when you are tendering for work like that. It may even change the type of documentation you have to apply. So there could be things like, a variety of verification checks that have to be done now. Compared to one independent assessor going through it, there might be other ways of validating your information or your competence in health and safety. So watch that space. So things that you can do right now to prep for, if I can say, these pre-qualification reviews, or this review that's coming up, is, I suppose, get your current pack, if I can call it that. So most organizations I go to right now, they have a pre-qualification pack of documents that they keep as the master templates, if I can say. So when the pre-qualification rolls around again for renewal in a year's time, we have all these base documents that we actually either update and supply or upload. And that way, at least, then you're given the same as you gave last time. So you should score the same as last time, given obviously that you maintain those good practices. So I would suggest you review your pre-qualification pack, okay? And that might mean looking at your triple SPs, might look at your health and safety records, and make sure you're not duplicating any evidence in there that you're going to be supplying, okay? So keep them in a file like that, keep them saved, and update them as and where required. Cool, okay. So that's pre-qual, okay? So some exciting news ahead, and I think for any of you that have been through that, the request of a client or a main contractor to go down the road of multiple different types of pre-qual, it's a pain in the backside for many, okay? And even to hear that one contractor that did 76 in 1 year, that's just ridiculous, right? So more consistency here, simplified tools, that's a positive note. All right, the other area that will be of interest, I'm sure, to a number of you, especially if you are going to site and doing install type work, be it glazing or window install, is the scaffolding rules currently that are in play at the moment. Okay, and some of the things here, when it comes to it, what the reform is proposing here now is a move to a more risk-based approach when it comes to scaffolding, okay, and any kind of height work. So there's a relaxing of some of these prescriptive scaffolding rules where, again, the risk might be low, for example. So what will happen now basically is that main contractors and entities like that will be doing risk assessments on site to determine what parts of the job would be considered to be potentially low risk and don't need a scaffold erected for it. So there's going to be clearer guidance, where risk is high, obviously, what you do. There's this push, as I say, towards more risk-based approaches and thinking in that space when it comes to working at height. So it will reduce any unnecessary scaffolding for low-risk tasks moving forward. So there may be certain things that can be done off a ladder versus the blanket policy of a scaff or bust. Okay, so there is obviously going to be an increased focus on the controls if things are going to be done off a ladder. Okay, so if no scaffolding, there has to be robust controls around, managing, again, any kind of height work like that, especially if it's done off a ladder. It's also going to look at the competence of the people doing the work. And again, there is at the moment, there is development of a new approved code of practice for scaffolding. So more recognition of scaffolders' competency, not qualification. And by competency here, I'm talking more experience-based competency. So tickets and things like that, if they got 15 years in the game, that may be recognized as suitable competency to go and erect scaffold. But like I say, the issue I'm seeing right now is when you have an installer who goes to site basically, and the main contractor on site has made a decision that the work can be done off a ladder. That's when it might get a bit hairy, right? So this is where, again, for high risk work like this, there is going to be this approved code of practice that's going to give very clear guidance around how we manage that kind of work. Okay, so obviously how that's going to affect members, those installation teams, on-site glazing, window installs, they'll see more flexibility around the rules there. There will be an increased emphasis on documented risk assessments, however, so don't think it's a case we just whip out the ladder. There has to be very clear documented risk assessments performed to justify a low risk status. So again, if there's, again, we talk about controls then around fall arrest, edge protection. If you're working near or on mobile platforms, there will have to be rules around that side of things. So right now, what you can do to prep, obviously, for these changes, things like updating your safe work method statements, JSAs, SOPs, if you use them, obviously, for the installation work that's done at height, okay? And emphasize that risk assessment as part of that SWIM or JSA or SOP. Make sure the people who are actually doing the work are competent to do that work at height, and make sure that you maintain inspection logs of any temporary works, right? So again, that's around edge protection, platforms, and so on. So yeah, even things like if you are bringing ladders to site moving forward, you will have to have, essentially a register of your ladders. They should be subject to regular inspections, so to make sure the footings are good. Again, there's no loose rivets, the locking arms are in place. And of course, the number one rule, that the ladder is high enough for the test that requires it, okay? So there's some of the things there. So that flexibility around scaffold and the reduction, if I can say, or the easing of the rules around scaffolding, it does not mean fewer controls. Let's just be crystal clear on that. It basically means there's going to be different choices on how height work is performed, and that needs to be backed up by this robust risk assessment and the controls. Okay. All right, simplifying some of the machine guarding rules. Again, a welcome piece of announcement from the government, because right now, again, irrespective of the risk level of machines, there's an expectation that, again, steps insofar as reasonably practicable will be taken. But what you have is you have low risk machines where the risk of entanglement or amputation might be low, but yet the guidance is towards you need to have interlocks and you need to have lasers, you need to have, again, over the top guards. So again, using this risk-based approach, they're going to be looking at simplifying a lot of the guarding rules. So WorkSafe and the industry, if I can say, expect guarding to meet, there's an expectation that guarding will meet the level of risk that's presented to the operator. Okay, so that means the application of rules like the rule of reasonable reach, if you've heard of that. If it's reasonable to reach in and touch moving parts, it's not sufficiently guarded. So that's one of the things right now that's being used as a method of defining whether a machine is guarded sufficiently or not. There's also things like guarding checklists, I'm sure you're aware of, interlocks on machines, so lockout, tagout processes, which I'm sure you've heard of, emergency stops, e-stops on machines, and just, maintenance when the machine is down. There is a physical lockout process, not just a tag put on the machine. There is an electrical isolation of that machine through, again, power shutdown or a padlock through the actual switch housing, right, to isolate that equipment from inadvertent use. So what the reform is proposing here under this simplifying of these machine guarding rules, it intends to remove any of these ambiguous or outdated prescriptive rules around again, machine guarding, and produce clearer, more risk-based guidance when it comes to machine guarding. So just expect an improvement here, and that ACOP, you'll see an approved code of practice. That's what they're going to develop, and that's going to help businesses understand what is reasonable when it comes to guarding my machine. Okay. Because businesses can spend lots and lots of money. I think there was a fabricator down south I visited recently, and the inspector asked them to put an interlock on one of their machines. I think the cost of getting the electrician in to install it was up around $6,000. I mean, that's crazy, if I can say, that kind of money, where the risk was perceived to be significantly low. Experienced operator, likelihood of it occurring, and history of any occurrences on the machine were zero, right? So, but the inspector was going very much on that best practice type thing, which again was over the top. So delighted to hear there's going to be a relaxing and simplification, should I say, of these machine guarding rules. So how it matters to members? Well, here, machinery used in your fabrication workshops, obviously, like your saws, your punches, your CNCs, they must remain guarded. There's no getting away from that. Whilst they simplify this approved code of practice, it should make compliance easier for you guys, but it does not remove any safety obligations you have to protect people from machine moving parts. So you'll still need to guard the machine. You'll still need to apply that rule of reasonable reach. But again, the clarification around the guarding requirements will be defined in this clear approved code of practice that's coming. So right now, recommended practice, review your guarding right now, as you can see there. So make sure that it is in place, it is secured, it is robust in that respect. Lotto, in case you don't know what that means, lock out, tag out. So that means electrically isolating that piece of equipment from inadvertent use. So those procedures you have right now around lockout, tagout basically should be working well. And when I say working well, communicate it to your people. I can't tell you how many fabricators I've gone to where, yes, the production manager and the health and safety person know all about the lockout process, but none of the boys and girls on the floor have any idea what it's about. So you do need to communicate that process to your people. So if they do encounter a substandard condition with the machine, that they know what to do and how to do it and where to find the lockout and so on. Okay. So make sure that you are doing regular maintenance of your machines. You're doing these pre-start checks. That could be a once a week thing, or like I've seen in some fabricators, every single day, the operator does a self-check on the equipment to make sure it's fit for purpose for the day ahead. Okay, so again, the risk assessment is very important. So again, not done in isolation. So not the production manager, not the safety person, not the operator on their own, all of those people together, basically a collaborative approach to a risk assessment around the sufficiency of guarding on a particular machine. Cool. Okay. Next one. All right, review of workplace exposure standards. So like I mentioned, this is something that's very much a hot potato at WorkSafe at the moment. Some of you may already have had the pleasure of a WorkSafe visit where they've actually taken quite a focus and interest on dust in your workplace, particularly wood dust. So right now, again, if I can just explain those workplace exposure standards, they are airborne concentrations of substances in a worker's breathing zone. So a breathing zone is defined as the area immediately surrounding their nose and mouth. Okay. So again, if there are substances, airborne fumes, vapors, dust, and so on, basically that can enter the nose or mouth, this is what the workplace standards are all about, these exposure standards. So they're intended to indicate a level of exposure which healthy adult workers basically may be exposed to without any adverse effect on their health, either in the short term or the long term. Okay. So a lot of the ACC claims right now for work-related illnesses that were, I suppose, accrued, if I can call it that, 20 years ago, basically, they are outweighing the cost of ACC work injury claims by 7 times right now. So the cost of illness claims far exceeds the cost of injuries. So they're trying to get ahead of this now by looking after the health of the worker today so that down the road, obviously, we don't have, again, this ill aging workforce, basically, that's costing New Zealand, ACC an absolute fortune. Okay. So if we can prevent them now, that's what WorkSafe is coming to look at. So they are measured by personal monitoring and using procedures to gather air samples in a worker's breathing zone. Now, your industry, if I may say, there's very few businesses I visit within the Window and Glass Association that would have workers exposed to a consistent exposure to dust, fumes, vapors like that, okay? So what we're talking about is industries like, fabrication, welding, for example, or you're using a machine all day where you're breathing in harmful exhausts or fumes from the machines, or you are a cutter that's cutting reveals or liners, and you're doing that as a full-time job where you're exposed to dust particles 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, okay? So in those types of environments, there will be very likely an expectation that you'll do an air quality study of that environment. And what basically happens there is the worker would wear a belt with a pump on the back, monitor pump basically, and there would be a pipe coming up over his shoulder to a lapel, if I can say, mounted monitor that would sample the air that he breathes every minute, every 3 minutes, or whatever the frequency might be. And at the end of the day, they take away the pump and the monitor, and they do the analysis of the data, and they identify, is this person exposed to values that are above, obviously, industry safe standards? And that then will lead to things like extraction system improvements, more air-fed respirator, but certainly looking at the respiratory protection, having it fit tested in the worker's face, as well as annual lung function screening. Okay, so there are some of the things, okay? So what the government is recommending now is prioritizing, tasks that have high dust and high solvent use, basically. And they recommend talking to an occupational hygienist if you have any concerns about the dust, fumes, vapors in your work area. I'm not a occupational hygienist. So they're the people who come in with the monitoring equipment and obviously sample the air. You can do noise studies, obviously, and you should be doing noise studies every 5 years in your workplace regardless. But when it comes to dust, fumes, and vapors and things like that, that's something that's airborne. So that has to be monitored using specialist equipment. Okay. So what is the reform looking and proposing to do here? So they've consulted, as you can see there, over the 24-25 year, they're reviewing and updating many of these workplace exposure standards across various substances. They are going to align them to international standards, folks. So we're seeing a reduction in scaffolding, we're seeing a reduction and an easing, if I can say, of some of the scaffolding rules. But when it comes to workers' health, there's an increase in the requirements. Okay, so they're going to be aligning a lot of the values and the standards and the threshold exposure limits now to international best practice standards. So I'm not too sure what this is going to mean for businesses, but yeah, ultimately what it could mean is lower exposure limits to dust, okay, and solvents. It could also mean changes, to the value, so they could lower the threshold exposure limits, which might mean new controls. It might mean an improvement to your extraction systems, more regular health checks than annual, more PPE, okay, of a specialist nature. So again, that's potentially where it could go, okay. So right now, what the government is encouraging, and WorkSafe certainly, is that you identify some of those processes in your business that produce these airborne contaminants, like the cutting, obviously, the wood dust, any spraying or grinding, that kind of thing. And they're saying that you should start monitoring or sampling where you have these exposures, okay? Only if you believe it is something that, again, is potentially harmful, right? So you're concerned in that respect, okay? I don't think we need to go down that road yet, because I don't believe, from my visits of fabrication shops, it's at that level yet. But like I say, once the values change, they may require businesses to get some kind of a baseline understanding as to, well, what are the values? What are the exposures in your business right now? It's easy for me to say, I don't think you're that bad, right? But yeah, it has to be factual, right? There has to be objective evidence to support whether it's above or below those threshold standards. Okay. So they're talking about engaging, obviously, with suppliers. If you are working with solvents and things like that, can you source less hazardous alternatives to the current solvents you're using? I'm sure many of you are aware there are a number of fabricators around the country that outsource the cutting of wood to a third party. So those liners and reveals are done by a subcontractor, and they come in cut finished. So they've eliminated the wood dust hazard out of their business. That might be something that some fabricators may want to explore. Okay. All right, overlapping duties. I did hint at this one earlier on, and this is something where there hasn't been a huge amount of clarity given in the previous legislation and some of the regulations released around these duties when it comes to overlapping. So construction, as I'm sure you're aware, is one of those highest injury categories, basically. It has the highest rates of acute and chronic harm. It accounts for 15% of all work-related fatalities and serious harm injuries. It has the highest number of worker injuries a highest number of workers with the exposure to harmful dusts, fumes, and toxic elements like silica and asbestos and things like that. So construction, it's nasty in that respect, okay? So there's a need for clearer guidance when it comes to, well, these overlapping duties that we have. There's multiple businesses on site here with shared responsibilities for managing similar risks on the same site, okay? So like builders and drain layers working together on the same site, basically they must work together to manage the risks. So it's all about coordination, communication. So to prevent harm on some of these construction sites, contractors have to be constantly changing, the risks and hazards of that particular contractor are continuously changing in the environment based on the weather, other trades. But yeah, when there's multiple contractors together, there has to be communication, toolboxes, pre-starts, just touching base. And WorkSafe has produced what they call a priority plan right now. And the focus of that is to target the businesses, larger businesses that have the biggest risks. And they want to achieve this safe construction site kind of status. So they're encouraging these larger businesses to lead the way in pre-qualifying, putting these kind of, requirements in place. And I suppose laying out, if I can say, the engagement expectations. So main contractors moving forward are going to be driving a lot of the overlapping duties, because right now it's unclear who's responsible for what type of thing. So what the reform is proposing here basically is more guidance from WorkSafe around how those duties to operate, are meant to be handled when it comes to multiple contractors on site sharing that workspace. They held them in, the Safety and Wellness Minister basically has asked WorkSafe to develop a specific approved code of practice for clarifying, again, the overlapping duties that businesses have when they're sharing that workspace together. And there's going to be documents that will state the practical expectations when it comes to main contractors and subcontractors on site. So defining responsibility, okay, that's going to be very much a part of it. So why we need to know this? Well, again, if any of your teams are going out into the field and they are doing install work versus the old heave and leave delivery, those fabricators who install on site, basically, on those third-party sites, basically, will commonly have overlapping duties with the other trades on those sites. So again, like I mentioned, it's about coordination and about clear communication. You tell them your hazards, they tell you theirs, we all go home safe. That's essentially what the message is meant to be. Okay. So the action here, basically, I would suggest that you include clear contract clauses about duties now if you are the main contractor and you are bringing in trades onto a site, or again in your own place of work where you might have multiple trades on site, like an electrician, like somebody, again, the cleaner on site, whatever. Again, if there is shared spaces, it's more, if I may say, targeted towards those construction environments though, folks, however. So making sure that, again, toolbox talks, and make sure that, again, the main contractor on site is championing, if I can say, those toolbox discussions and documenting the minutes of conversations and coordinations that they're having with other trades basically on site. So WorkSafe right now, as part of the previous legislation, or current legislation, should I say, has developed some guidance, some quick guidance around overlapping duties for PCBUs. And it's a template that you can use for meetings to capture, even pre-start templates, I believe, where you can capture this communication between multiple trades on site. Now, this last one here is like I say, it's one of the ones that's going to be welcome news for a number of businesses because, right now businesses, I'll put it this way, WorkSafe doesn't have the resource to come out and do investigations of incidents in your workplace. So right now it's a legal responsibility. If I turn on a machine and I get an electric shock, I have to tell WorkSafe about that. The reality is WorkSafe aren't resourced to send someone to site to investigate that. So lots of businesses are going, we're sending these things, there's no feedback. What's the point? And
as well as Austin still confirmed with Clifford. So that's
yep, thank you. So what WorkSafe want moving forward now is only serious injuries, illnesses, and fatalities reported. Okay, so not every significant event, basically. So what we're talking about when it comes to serious injuries, that has to be defined. So right now we have notifiable events, fatalities, illnesses, injuries, and incidents. They're the four categories. They're going to redefine what a notifiable event is going to be. And like I say, it won't be every nick and cut and whatever else. It will be serious stuff. So deep tissue wounds requiring multiple stitches, broken bones, amputations, deglovings. These are going to be the gory categories that they'll want to know about. Same thing around illnesses. So again, cancers, asbestosis, these types of things, silicosis, that people get these serious illnesses from workplace exposure from uncontrolled risk. So that will mean less administrative reporting and near misses. Only the serious stuff will need to be put through on that respect, okay? So again, when the time comes, you will just be required from a fabricator point of view to update your definition of notifiable event. And again, that will be across your manuals, procedures. Obviously, brief your first aid people, brief your health and safety people around what needs to be notified moving forward as well. Cool. Now, as promised, critical risk. So this one is, you can see in brackets there, it's still a working definition. And this is only up, and I checked it last night to see was there any more movement on this, and there hasn't been. The proposed concept of critical risk right now is as per what you'll read there. So any work activity or a hazard that has the potential to cause death or life-changing serious injury or illness to a person, if it's not managed using strong, robust, verified controls. So that's what critical risk is going to be defined as. So if we talked about the minister's example of a cafe or a retailer, I don't know many things in a cafe that could cause death or life-changing serious injury or illness, right? Fair enough, okay? So cafes and retailers won't have potentially any critical risk in them. But obviously when we talk about a fabricator or an installer, for example, there are things. Falls from height, there's, again, amputation from a machine, that is a life-changing serious injury. It's not going to grow back. So this is what we'll have to tell WorkSafe about moving forward, okay? And this is where, again, if you are a business that has critical risk, this is what you'll be measured against, okay? So it's not about likelihood anymore, it's all about consequence. So you have a risk assessment, likelihood, consequence. The likelihood now is taking the back seat. It's more about the outcome. If that actually happened, how bad could it be? And if the severity of harm that can come from that particular event is deemed to be critical, then what we're expecting here is strong, verified, robust controls. So you might need to seek some industry expertise input into how you manage those risks of your business. So even as you can see, they're rare events like a scaffolding collapsing. If it did happen, somebody could be killed, right? So that's seen as it's critical risk, right? So what do? So we're expecting here things like, weekly inspections where, again, there needs to be, no authority for anyone to move a transom or change a scaffold layout, trained only people to work at height, securing, all these things, okay? So we would have to have these robust, industry approved, if I can say, controls around critical risk. Well, from here, what do? So as I mentioned, there is a bill going before Parliament. Some have gone and they're in the mix at the moment. So it's still going to be early next year before we see this reformed act. So just based on our conversations this afternoon, identify these critical risks in your business. And as I say, do that in consultation with your people. So again, it's a collaborative effort. It's never one person's subjective view. I think the risk is critical. It has to be a shared risk profile. Map out which of those proposed reforms will affect you. So most of what we talked about, if not all, will affect you today. There are others, and I'll talk about where you can find out information about the others. And by others, I also mean the ones we talked about in the last session as well. So that takes into account things like good governance and health and safety. So again, that side of things, and a few other things there as well. Update your risk registers. So again, if you are doing triple SPs and so on, you'll have to be very focused around critical risks on your site-specific safety plans and your JSAs, and show how you've managed that risk. And again, focusing on the controls that you've applied for any of that site work that you might do. Your main contractor moving forward may be very thorough when it comes to how you're managing the critical risks of your business activities. Document, obviously, evidence, very important, obviously. Minutes, risk controls, responsibilities, very important, obviously. And again, any communication with your people around critical risk, you need to actually have attendance records. They need to be physically signing off that they were part of the conversation. Go over your pre-qualification pack that you've developed, all those key documents, if you are part of SiteWise, Tortica or otherwise, and just make sure, obviously, moving forward, that you have a base set of master documents, if I can say that, without any duplicated efforts in there. Guarding, like I say right now, it is going to be subject to change, potentially relaxing. So again, do an audit of your guarding right now. And yeah, I mean, there's a few other fabricators I'm working with who have some improvement notices they're working through at WorkSafe at the moment. Yeah, they may do it now, but at this time next year, for example, they may not be required to go as far as they need to go. But the law is still the law today. Dust exposure, yeah, just keep an eye on it for now, folks. Like I say, I can't tell you to do an air quality study because, yeah, they haven't released any more details around an approved code of practice or what these values are going to be as regards exposure limits. So just keep an eye on it. Have a look at your extraction systems. If you are, again, working with wood dust in your area, please don't use compressed air to clean down the machine or sweep the floor. Please don't use brooms to sweep the floor. Everything should be vacuumed off the machine or vacuumed off the floor. Try not to generate dust particles that will get up and be suspended in the air and be a risk to your people, obviously. Clarify contracts with overlapping duties? Yeah, absolutely. So again, just be mindful there. There is going to be more expectation where multiple contractors are working together, sharing the same space around who does what. What hazards are you going to create? Who has overarching responsibility to make sure that those duties have been communicated and that there's coordination of your efforts on site around other contract work. As promised, if you are looking for more information about what I've talked about today, obviously through WorkSafe's website, they will have certainly good information there and guides, quick guides around overlapping duties, machine guarding, the rule of reasonable reach we talked about, scaffolding guidance as well, and those workplace exposure standards. If you're looking for updates as regards announcements on where things are at as regards the bill before Parliament, any new announcements, certainly through the Beehive, you can access that on the web. MBIE, Ministry of Business, have a moment, MBIE, the substance consultations, dust and silica. Just if you're looking for more information around that side of things, just, yeah, that's where you'll find it there. So when we talk about these exposure standards, that overlaps with WorkSafe as well. So MBIE is doing a little more in that space as well. And the last one there is around consultation, where they do put out things like, which they will, approve codes of practice for public interest, comments and feedback. What do you think? They're doing that right now with the scaffolding industry. They're talking to the scaffolding people, just like when it comes to the overlapping duties, they're talking to CHASANS, the Construction Health and Safety Association, and they're making sure that all these interested parties are part of the conversation. That's me, folks. Any questions? Brett, anything come through?
Yes, but let's start with an answer. MB is the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment.
Forgive me, I just got a moment there. After my 40 minutes of just download, I just got a blank.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
I know
Thank
exactly what that's like. Right, yeah, I've got a couple of questions here for you. The first one is, with the safe working at heights, what training requirements cover our risks in terms of EWP scissor lifts, especially say when the client we're doing the work for has rented or hired the scissor lift, that we're required to use it to complete the task?
Yep. Again, there's probably another part to the question. Is the client stipulating training? If they're not, yes, anybody who does work at height should be trained to do so. So that's a course, that's a unit standard course, basically. You also have the issue of the harnesses and lanyards, whether they're provided by the hire company or you have your own. There's an inspection and checking. They expire, obviously. So there's that side of things. But anybody who performs work at height should be suitably trained to do so. If you're hiring an EWP, I think the hiring company has to give you a demonstration as to how to operate. But yeah, typically, if you are going above 5 meters, for example, you will need to be notifying that work to WorkSafe number 1, because anything over 5 meters is notifiable. And the people who are doing that work at height basically must be, again, conversant with how to fit the harness, the lanyard, obviously, and do work from height.
Okay, thank you. John, you asked that question, so feel free to unmute yourself if you want more detail.
No, thank you. That's good. Appreciate it.
The next question I've got is, are we expecting the government to provide a new standard pre-qual system, or to select one of the existing and make that the standard one?
Yeah, that's the golden question right now. I think what they're going to do is, if any of you guys or girls have gone down the road of doing Totika, most haven't, I must admit, it is a hell of an exercise, right? There is a lot to go through. It's a timely thing. And again, very critical around what you upload. So interpreting the question is half the battle, basically. What do they want? And very hard. There's 5 levels to it, so from, again, the basic right up to performing at a high level type thing. Yeah, unachievable, if I may say, for many fabricators, because they just don't have systems that are robust enough to meet all its needs. So I think that, I'm not going to say it's a dead duck, but it's, again, the people who go down the road of Totika are mainly doing it for very large players like Fletcher's, Carter Holt, those big players, if I can say, that demand excellence from their service providers. Most of the others, that might be, the group home builders and others like that, basically, they wouldn't put that, because it's unachievable, if I can say, from any fabric. And it's unfair, right, to ask a business to go down that road. So this is why I was saying earlier on that site-wise is the more preferred at the moment for the sizes of the organizations that are working in this particular industry. I can't honestly tell you if it's going to be a blend of those or if it's going to be something different completely, but they're going to make it easier, right? They're going to clarify so more businesses can have their systems assessed to, again, a recognized standard of safety.
Thank you. Kenneth, just a comment for me. So I found what you presented today both really useful and really frustrating. And so I'm just, from your perspective, in terms of the changes that are being proposed, are they moving at the pace that the industry is expecting? Are we going faster or slower? I don't get a sense of where it's going to land, or more importantly, when.
Yeah. Look, it is moving slower than expected. I mean, I think when I presented last in August, there was all these milestone dates that they had indicated were going to be happening by. They haven't happened. Yeah. So there is a real lag in it, and now we're getting closer to Christmas. Things are going to slow down even more. And I literally had to go chasing around to find other things that are happening, because there hasn't been a huge amount of progress since I saw you last in August. So that's frustrating for me. And look, more and more of what I'm reading and hearing, basically, as much obviously as I'm promoting best practice, obviously in that sense, a lot of this is, your reductions in guarding, reductions in scaffolding rules. I'm hoping that reduction doesn't come at a cost. Okay, and that cost would be safety and well-being, obviously, where people will become conversant and cut corners and, fudge, if I may say, a risk assessment to make it work in their favor, so they don't need a scaffold, we'll do it off a ladder, and that's when it gets, again, critical risk. It's totally subjective. It's really down to the audience. It's not like WorkSafe is going to come in and tell you that's a critical risk. You define your critical risks as a business entity.
And it's also wasteful because as an industry, we can all agree, we all do the same kind of work. We can go, these are the critical risks. We don't need everyone having to, I mean, I know you need the engagement and the involvement of
Yep.
everyone on the floor and everyone involved, but there's also a sense of the what ABC Limited doing is exactly the same as XYZ Limited, and yet you're both having to go through that same exercise.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Every business is different, and how they manage their controls will be different. The
Right.
competence of their people doing the work will be different. So
Oh,
there's
yeah,
so
so
many
yeah, good
variables
point.
in there. That's why it's so subjective. But
Right.
yeah, it,
Yeah.
it really relies on a realistic approach, obviously, to risk assessment, and again, focused more on the consequence of harm than the likelihood of it happening.
Yeah.
So if the outcome could be death, that's a critical risk.
Yeah, I can understand that one. I think the other thing you're telling me is we shouldn't set the date for the first one of these in 2026. We should
No,
wait to actually
no.
see.
Until I know more in that sense, because right
Exactly.
now there's a lot of
Hmm.
indication that it's going to be happening before the bills are going to be submitted.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm not getting anything, and I'm regularly into the beehive and legislation at GOVT trying to find updates, but they're very slow to progress.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think they're in consultation, which is a good thing. They're talking to all the right people, so they're
Yep.
getting all the right responses to the questions being asked. So hopefully that in itself yields something that's more favorable. I mean, I heard something recently. There was a survey done with SiteSafe around these proposed reforms, and I think certainly in the 80 to 90 percentile, SiteSafe members were happy with the direction it was going.
Oh, that's
So
impressive. Good.
that was only in the last couple of days, basically. I didn't get into the details in depth, but certainly there was an indication that SiteSafe is happy with progress and where it's heading.
Yep. I understand your concerns about the risk of the direction, but what you presented today, from my perspective, seemed reasonably sensible
Yeah, look,
and
absolutely.
pragmatic.
Again, once I can understand the thinking behind it, but yeah, the main thing is it's done right, and
Yep.
that we don't cut corners or we don't, for the sake of trying to win votes or again popularity, whatever else. Yeah, that's the
Mm.
thing. So again, it's all about the health and well-being of the worker going home safe every day.
Yep.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I think ACC, they're not happy with this because they can see more claims occurring because complacency is going to creep in. If I don't have to do it, I'm not going to do it, and that opens the door to potential problems.
Right.
Families of the Pike River victims, yeah, they don't believe this is a step in the right direction. This
Yep.
is the reason why the law changed is because of Pike River, and here we are reverting back to carving out requirements and, easing of the requirements in certain areas and relaxing the rules. Yeah.
There's always going to be a tension there. I
Oh,
appreciate
look,
that.
absolutely. Agreed. But right now, look, I mean, again, I think I mentioned in the previous one, the survey that was done by the minister around the country, just the amount of businesses who see the cost of compliance and the time involved to get their business compliant is seen as one of their biggest business risks. So I'm like, okay. So that's the feedback she's received, basically. And yeah, look, like I say, I have no problem with cafes and retailers having a reduction in the requirements. That's fair. There's no point in a cafe having to meet the same regulatory requirements as an oil refinery. That doesn't make sense. So it makes sense to have those low risk entities doing less, if I can say, because there's no critical risks. But unfortunately, I mean, window fabrication is a service to construction and it's a manufacturer. So you're in two of the four high risk buckets there. Forestry and agriculture are the other two. So
Yep.
twice as likely to be visited by a WorkSafe inspector and twice as likely to have harm from your activities than these low risk industries.
Yep.
Mm.
Last couple of questions for you. Are we
Sure.
waiting for any updated templates, or do you have some templates that we can start incorporating into our business while we wait for the government's proposed templates?
I have nothing, no. And I wouldn't like to share something in case it's in the wrong direction to the way it's going to turn out. Because as I say, right now it's all consultation. And yeah, until I see something meaty that has some kind of framework around what they're proposing, that's when I'll start developing some templates like that. And it'll be
Yep.
to kind of hit the ground running before it becomes legislation. And I will do that in consultation with other, well, again, being a member of the Health and Safety Association of New Zealand, I'll be getting that through the various peer groups that I have.
Yep. I'll finish with two things. Firstly, on screen, you've got your phone number and your email. So if anyone's got any other questions or wants some help, I'm sure they can contact you directly. And I'll finish with the last comment we've got, which is not a question, but if progress is, this is from Michael Peterson, if progress is not made in the early mid part of next year, MB will go into hiatus as the election looms, as they do in every election cycle. Unfortunately, Michael,
Likely.
you're absolutely right. We know that's true. We know that's true. We hope we get this sorted before then. Yep.
Oh, look,
Yeah.
and all indicators are it'll be a 1st of April launch, right?
Okay.
Effectiveness, if I can say, right? Enactable as of the 1st of April.
Right.
So
Okay.
we'll watch this space. It could be sooner. I don't know, but yeah, the indications I'm hearing right now is 1st of April next year.
Yep. All right. Fingers and toes crossed. Excellent.
Indeed,
Thank you
indeed.
very much, everyone, for your time. I hope you found that useful. I did. We appreciate your time, appreciate you joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks,
Thanks,
Kenneth. Really
everyone.
appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.